Hello and welcome everyone. In this tutorial, we will discuss what are views in Django. So, we will start off this video by understanding what is a view in Django. Then, we will understand how we can create a view. After this, we will understand how we can map a URL to a view. And in the last, we will discuss the whole process, how Django processes a request. Moreover, in this tutorial, we will also implement one example. So without any further delay, let's jump to the very first topic and let's discuss what are views in Django. Now basically, a view in Django is a crucial element that takes web requests and a web response at their base. Its key role is to render HTML pages, fetch data from database, process forms, etc. Moreover, any additional logic required to provide that response is already included in the view. A view in Django can be classified into two major categories. Very first is the class-based view. Now in the class-based view, we define view by implementing a Python class. And the second category of view is function-based view. So in a function-based view, we define a view and all its logic inside a function. Now for the current instance, in this tutorial, we will utilize function-based view to keep things simple. Moreover, a view is always defined in a views.py file that we have discussed in the previous tutorial. So let us understand how we can define a view in Django. For this, we will utilize our course system project and we will also utilize the home app which we have created in the starting of the tutorial series. So what I will do, I will open my VS Code and let me show you the views.py file which is there in the home application. So here you can see I have opened my VS Code. First I will expand this home directory. Within this home directory I have this views.py file. Now when we open this views.py file for the very first time, it will consist of the following code. So what we need to do to define a view, we will define a function. So what I will do for this implementation, first I need to import HTTP response which is there in the Django.http module. So I will write from Django.http import HTTP response. After this, how we can define a view in Django? So to define a function based view, we simply need to define a function. So I will type def, which is a keyword used to define a function. Then we need to define the name of the function. I will name my function as index. Now whenever we want to define a function based view, we need to define a request argument with that view. So I need to define here request. Now request here is a object of this HTTP response class. So what I will do within this function, I will simply return one HTTP response. So I will type return then HTTP response. Within this HTTP response I can pass any string. So I will simply type welcome to Python guides. So what I have done here, I have defined a very simple function based view whose name is index. Now when we try to define a function based view, we need to pass a request parameter to it. Now within the body of this view, I am returning one HTTP response. So what this HTTP response will do, it will return HTML page. It will simply return an HTML page with the following text on it. So I want an HTML page with this text, welcome to Python guides. Now after this, even if we run the development server by using the run server command, we will get the same welcome page. This is due to the fact that core system project is unaware of the index view. So let me quickly open my command prompt, or I will open my terminal here only. Now I want a terminal of command prompt and let me quickly activate my virtual environment here. So I will move back to the directory, then I will look to my virtual environment. Now my virtual environment has been activated. Now let's move back to the course directory where my manage.py file has been located. Now next, let's run the python manage.py run server command to run the application. Let me copy this URL. So here you can see whenever we run our development server now, it will open this same page. Now the main reason behind this thing is that we haven't defined any link between our application and the project. So next what we need to do, we need to define the connection between them, and for that we need to define our application name within the settings.py file of the project. So I will move back to the VS Code. Now here I need to open a my settings.py file, which is there in the course system directory. Now let me move my terminal a little bit downward, and here you can see this list installed apps, and within this I need to define the name of my application. So my name of my application is home. Now with this we have defined a connection between the project and the home application. So I will save this file. Now next what we need to do, we need to link our view function to a specific URL, and for this we need to understand what is URL config. So in a nutshell, URL config acts as a mapping between URLs and the callback function for the views that goes with the URL. It allows us to instruct Django to call one code for this URL and another for another URL. For instance, calling the view function index from Python module views.py file whenever someone calls a URL home. And we will implement the same with the help of an example. So let us understand how to set up URL for our index view that we have created just now. So first what we need to do, we need to open the urls.py file which is there in our project directory. So here you can see under course system I have this file urls.py, and within this you can see I have some pre-written code. This code will be available at your end as well. What this code is defining basically, so this is the URL mapping for our admin interface. So in the previous tutorial we have understand how we can log into our admin interface. So this is the URL which is defined for our admin page. Now what we need to do, we need to define one URL. So for this we use this path function. Now if I talk about this path function, this is the syntax which you can see on the screen, and it is a part of Django.urls module. Now the role of this path function is to map the URL and call the supplied view. So very first parameter in the syntax of this path function is root, which is used to define the URL. The second parameter, which is view, is used to define the view which will be linked to the following URL, given URL. Then there is keyword arguments, and by default the value for keyword argument is none, and in the last we have the name parameter which is used to define the name of the view. So what we will do in this example, we will define another path with name home, and here I will use another function which is include. Now include function is also part of Django.urls module. You can see I have already imported this. The role of this include function is to include all the views. So here I will define the home.url. So what I am doing by defining this, so whenever a user tries to go to the /home URL, it will redirect to the URLs given in the home application. So next what we have to do, we have to create another urls.py file in our home application. Now I have already created this urls.py file, and what we need to do in this urls.py file, see, now that we have defined a link up between our home application and the project, and whenever we try to go to the /home URL, it will redirect to the views which are defined in the URL file of the home application. So here we need to define one URL which will map to the index function. So I will first import the path function. So I will type from Django.urls, I will import path. After this I will import all the views which I have defined. So I will type from period import views. Now next I have to define URL patterns. So here URL patterns is a list in which we will define our path. So first I will use this path function. Within this, first is the root parameter. For this I will keep this empty. Next we need to define the view. So I want to map index view. So I will type views dot index, and then we need to define the name for the view. So I will name this view as home. Now with this we are ready with our first Django application. But before we get started with the Django application, let us understand how Django processes a request. So we can consider Django as an application running on a server whose main task is to process a request. So whenever Django receives a request, it calls for the function and returns the result. So this was just an overview. Let's understand the whole thing in detail. So whenever we run the Django server, the first thing that is loaded after the settings.py file is the middleware. So where these middlewares are defined, it is defined in the settings.py file only. So if I show you my settings.py file, and if we scroll up, here you can see certain middlewares are defined. Now accordingly, when a request is made from a list, security middleware is used to process it. It wouldn't allow the request to process further if it determines to be unhealthy. In every other case, the middleware for authentication handles the request. So once the middleware has been passed, the request goes to the URL router. The URL router takes the requested URL and attempts to find the match with the predefined URLs. So first it will check for the URL in this main project file. So for example, I pass this home/URL, then it will look into the URL file of the home application and it will try to find the matching URL which I have passed. The appropriate view function involves as soon as we find a suitable URL, multiple attributes and additional URL parameters will be passed by the view method. These requests are regarded as an object of the HTTP response class. And in the end, once the execution of the view function is been completed, the final response is generated as an HTTP response. Moreover, the final response is not restricted to that. A response can be in the form of JSON, CSV, or even PDF. So now that we understand the whole process, let's run the run server command and let's look to the result. Now I will follow this link, but what I have to do here, I have to define home, and here you can see the result. So whenever I go to the home page, it will look to the URLs defined in the home application, and as I have defined an empty string, so there is no followed URL after home, and this is the result of the index view. So with this, we have come to the end of this tutorial session where we have discussed what are views and how we can create them in Django. Thank you so much for watching this video. We will see you in the next one.